I'm Lou Brutus, and one of the human beings I most love to speak to about both music and cinema is Andy Biersack of Veil Brides. How are you, Andy, looking resplendent in a Kiss Destroyer shirt?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm happy. I just got home to Florida a couple days ago, and Lilith, my wife, is out. So it's one of those ships in the night thing where she left 3 days before I got home. But at the end of the week, we will be reunited together at the house. So we're happy about that.
I got to tell you, I've caught her a couple of times during the course of the summer. She's an amazing performer. She's like walking art. She's really fun to take pictures of. She really is one of the most photogenic human beings I have ever seen before. Again, she's very Bowie-esque. She's just like walking art.
Yep, agreed. Agreed. Big fan. Maybe it's obvious, but I'm a big fan.
I would think so. So first, let's start with Trinity of Terror. That continues, and I would have to think that everybody, all of the artists involved, are still feeling really good about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's so rare that, and look, when we first talked about the tour, people that are in the know, so to speak, like yourself, understood that this pairing made a lot of sense, and you commented right away, this is a match made in heaven sort of thing. But when we first pitched this tour, admittedly, a lot of promoters didn't get it necessarily or didn't understand that. I would say that the main thing that we got in terms of an audience or a response from the few people who maybe didn't pick up on the first run was, oh, this is just the same audience 3 times over. It won't amount for more tickets, blah, blah, blah. And I can understand that perspective, but the argument we were making was there is crossover audience with these 3 bands, but there's also unique and individual fans who will have an opportunity to see all 3 bands. And when you package the 3 bands together, somebody who maybe is reticent to go out to one show is going to go, wow, I'm going to get to see all 3 of those at another show. So the first leg, the promoters who did come in on it and believed in it were rewarded. And leg 2 got even bigger. And leg 3, we're heading into, rooms that realistically none of the 3 bands have played on our own. So, not to be like braggadocious, but it's nice when something that we all really believed in has succeeded, and that the fans, more importantly, have said, yes, this is something we want to see. So, with this being ostensibly what is probably the final leg of it, at least for the time being, we're really looking forward to ending this on such a high note.
How has it been technically, without getting too deep into the weeds, because all 3 bands do full stage shows? There's obviously miniature logistical nightmares each night. How have the crews and the bands been able to deal with everything?
I think that the headaches, really started at the beginning, more so of, like you say, how do you make this work? And then by the time we got leg 1 rolling, we had at least a blueprint of how to make it work, which is ostensibly the same staging for all 3 bands, utilizing video content that can be different for every band. And then any band that wants to bring their own sort of extemporaneous staging out, whether that's, Ice Nine has horror movie elements, or, Motionless has smoke barrels, or all these different things, that can be something that's supplementary, but the bones of the stage will be essentially the same. And we've worked that out to where, now this last run that we just finished, this is the biggest rooms that we had played. So you're going into larger scale arenas every day. And that afforded us the opportunity to really grow the show. And rather than bringing a video wall that stands up on its own, we're hanging large scale LED walls in the arenas, and we're flying the rigs every day. And the staging can be more widespread. And, we went from one truck, one semi, to 5 trucks and multiple buses and all that stuff, just because of, again, this goes back to the fact that the fans have supported the tour and people have been buying tickets and showing up, that we've been able to scale it to where now, if you're coming to this next leg, you're going to see what I believe is the best possible show from all 3 bands.
Yeah, I always enjoy a show where you go in and you see where your money has been spent.
Sure. Yeah.
There's nothing worse than dropping a lot of money on a concert and then, like, you don't really get much value for it. So
I would argue that this show is almost an abundance of value, in that it's a long show. You know what I mean? Like, it's we've got Atreyu joining us on this leg. So you've got Atreyu, then you've got 3 full headline sets from each band. So you're not admittedly, and maybe this is an undersell, but you're not getting out of there. And if you're seeing all three bands, you're not getting out of there until around midnight every night. So there's a lot of live music happening.
Well, that's excellent stuff. Now then, tell me about working in brand new music. Let's talk about the Mourning EP. Tell me how it came about. Tell me the timeline. Tell me everything.
Well, when we finished making The Phantom Tomorrow, there was an immediate interest to kind of keep going, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like, we were just clicking so well, and the band was doing so well in terms of creativity. And producer Eric Ron, we were just, going over to his place every day. At the time, I lived very close to his studio. Most of the guys were kind of in the surrounding area. And, we were still in the middle of the shutdown where there wasn't much you could do. And so we just kept writing. And in some cases, we recorded elements of something and then we maybe went away. In other cases, you maybe had something that was just a demo that was a musical piece that never went anywhere. But there were all these little bits and pieces. So we just kept working at it. And then we took some time off. We did some touring. We toured within this moment. And then came back and said, you know what, we actually probably have something more here than just some odds and ends. Why don't we try to do this in earnest and put together, at the very least, if not a 12-song record, 6-song EP, something that can be put out, because we've got some really good ideas here. And that's honestly where it was born, was just, and the other thing is, further down the road, there is more material that was recorded that we hope to be able to put out by year's end. But for now, I think this is, to me, it's 6 solid tracks or 5 solid tracks, I guess it is. Can't remember what the number is, that represent, I think, a transitionary period between The Phantom Tomorrow to where ultimately we'll end up going with the next full-length record.
Also, I think EPs work rather well these days. I sometimes compare the music era we're in now to the mid-1960s, where a band would drop a single, then another single, then a 4-song EP, and sort of build up to a full album. The consumption seems a little bit the same from consumers that way, I think.
But it's also a bizarre time in that that's what's being advocated, and this is not meant to be in any way admonishing anybody that we've worked with, but the people who worked at the distributors for the label that we've been with, you see people in press that work at the distribution company saying, well, the goal for every artist should be to release something every 6 weeks. And you're kind of going, ideally, wouldn't that be wonderful? But then what is the potential quality of that? You're not dealing with, and this is, again, not to say that any other form of music is invalid, but when you're dealing with hard rock and heavy metal, these are songs that, whether somebody likes it or not, whether somebody enjoys the specifics of the song or not, it would be impossible to not notice that there is a 1.5-minute long dual lead guitar solo and violin parts and all this other stuff. That takes time to gestate. That takes time to write. That takes time to perfect. So it certainly is a market that's moving back towards that. But I would say that for us, the goal would be to find a happy medium where I think we'd all like to release music more regularly, just because we enjoy that process, but also to make sure that what we're releasing doesn't feel as if it's a bunch of also-rans that we're just sort of putting out there because we need to make sure that you don't forget us. I mean, I think there's certainly validity in making sure that your audience is getting what, is now referred to as content, but I think it's just as valid to make sure that what you're doing, it has the integrity that at the very least, it's something that you'd want to listen to and not just sort of garbage that you're putting out because that's what the distribution company claims you should do or whatever.
Have you ever released anything that you were a bit rushed on, and then after it hit, it could be music, could be a video, could be some other form of art, that you look back at and think, oh man, we really should have spent a little bit more time and polished it up?
I have, and then I've gone back on that. I was actually having this conversation with a friend of mine today. One of the things I think that, that we always talk about, what is it that early in a band's career, what's that magic or that spark? People always tend to like the first 3 records rather than the next 3 records, rather than the subsequent 3 records, in any band's history. And I think a big part of it is not knowing what you don't know, and just the kind of basic instinct of going, I'm 20 years old and going to make a rock and roll record. There's something that's so this sort of intangible that exists in that world where you are just doing stuff. Like, there's a song of ours called Legacy, which is one of the most kind of biggest songs that we have in our set. The video was very successful. It did a lot for our career. I hate the lead vocal in that song in the verses. Like the performance is lazy. I could have done it so much better, and have, by the way, subsequently been doing it much better live for the last 11 years. But that song connects, and who am I to say that it was wrong that we did it the way that we did? So you can beat yourself up forever and say, oh, I wish that I hadn't hurried something. But that one time where for us, it was more about not necessarily hurried, but more about having the assets to be able to do it better was, we re-recorded our first record in late 20 or in early 2020. And so that was an opportunity to do it again. But even then you listen to it and go, to me, this sounds better. But as a fan going, well, this isn't the magic. Like, I want to be able to hear the toilets flushing in the background. You know what I mean? Like, what is the connection that the fan has? You're a Kiss fan as well. Those first 3 records are sort of just trash water when in terms of audio. Like, this Hotter Than Hell is almost unlistenable if you remove yourself from being a Kiss fan.
It's so muddy. Yeah.
But I wouldn't want it changed necessarily, because that's the core memory that I have. So it's hard to judge yourself in that way, I think.
If it will make you feel any better, I once did an interview with the late, great cartoon director Chuck Jones, who, shelves full of Oscars. And at one point I asked, when you go to these film festivals and you're lauded as a genius, do you look at these cartoons and enjoy them, or do you want to fix stuff? And he said, it's torture. It's a nightmare. All I see are the mistakes. We should have held the hammer hitting the coyote for one more frame. And he said, it's just torture to watch that. So I guess you're in the same boat with a lot of other artists in that respect. So
I think it is really about, and I think all of us who make art in any way, we have that. I don't know if you do this as well, where when something is about to be released, that is the time where I'm really focused on it. If we have a record, I'll listen to it constantly. If I have a book coming out, I'll make sure I'm rereading everything, even if I can't make changes because the stuff's already, sent away and printed or made. But as soon as it comes out, there is such a feeling for me of almost a relief, because I can't do anything about anything I don't like anymore. Like, it's theirs now. You know what I mean? It's the world's, and now I can go focus on the next thing that I can still tinker with and change, because now this one's done.
One of the things that I really enjoyed in this first taste of the Mourning EP is the artwork for it. Is that something original, or is that some old woodcut from Germany in the 1600s? It's stark and it's beautiful, and I'd be curious to hear about its origins.
So obviously, and this is going to get me in trouble because it's pronunciation, right? Gustav, is it Dor or Dore? I never know how to pronounce it.
I know who you mean. I don't. Yeah. I couldn't pronounce it.
So I've always been a massive fan of his art, and over the years have taken advantage of the fact that some of it is in the public domain because of its age, and used it for interior artwork or and other pieces and stuff, similar, like what you might call sound-alikes. There's versions of his art, wood carvings and stuff. And in our house, I have some, reprints of his paintings. And, it's just always been, for whatever reason, growing up, maybe it's just growing up Catholic, I always saw it around me. And the goal was to try to have an original piece that reminds you in some way of that kind of, old biblical wood carving painting, but came from ultimately McBride at our label, who's the design guy there. It was many conversations and back and forths on how do you do this digitally? How do you find a way to make this look like kind of what I'm thinking? And I'd send a bunch of paintings from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and then we talk about what's realistic in terms of that for a timeline. And we've been really lucky, over the years to work with a lot of fantastic painters, and this is one of the first times that we've ever gone the digital route with our art. Really, all of our album covers from the first record on have been done by, whether it was Richard Villa, who painted all the records up to Veil. The band has always had really, the artwork's always been really important. So I was kind of hesitant to go with digital art, art that comes from essentially a computer, but being able to say, okay, well, we're going to really nail the aesthetic that is in my mind, and I think that we have. So I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Being a fellow Catholic and haunted by some of the imagery through the years.
Yeah.
Were you ever a fan? Have you ever been a fan of, and I'll probably butcher this name, Hieronymus Bosch?
Oh yeah, another great example of horrifying Catholic art. I always say people often talk about what was your entry point into dark imagery, right? And people will always sort of cite, the horror movies and stuff, and I love all that stuff. But you don't really need to look any further than growing up in a Catholic church and looking up and seeing the Stations of the Cross all around you, painted in graphic detail, and being like, oh, and this is also a representation of a good thing. So it's sort of, you go, oh, well, this is a confusing message for an 8-year-old, but here we are. And I don't think it's, not to say that this guy has anything to do with it, but when then you look at this, you're going, okay, well, this is not that dissimilar in terms of a visual, right? Is the Gene Simmons action figure. So again, maybe I just accidentally said that Gene Simmons is like Jesus, but that really wasn't my intention. What I meant to say is that the imagery of the blood and the heroics, all these things being mixed together and having this symbol of hope that is so meaningful and people are singing songs about, and also within that symbolism is this sort of really grim imagery. To me, that sort of is the beginning point of me going, well, okay, then there's Kiss, and Gene Simmons is a superhero, but he's also spitting out blood. And then Batman is a superhero, but he's also sitting on a gargoyle. And how do you mix the heroics with the dark and grim? And I guess at the end of the day, that's how you get Black Veil Brides, I guess.
Speaking of saviors, boy, that was a clunky transition, but
at least you didn't accidentally compare an action figure of Jesus to Christ, or of Gene Simmons to Christ.
You outdid me there. But tell me about Savior 2. What sort of insight can you give to it?
So Savior 1, the first Savior, is a song from our second record that there's so few songs in your life that you write, at least for me, that 15 minutes to do the thing. You know what I mean? Where just from the time Jinx completed the musical bed to bringing it over to me in the studio, to me sitting down, to writing everything and then tracking it within an hour, because I just knew what I wanted to say. I knew every part of it. And that's one of those songs. Savior 2 kind of took longer, in the sense that because there was so much, that song has been so meaningful for our career and for our audience, and it's a song that a lot of people have derived great meaning for their life from. There's a responsibility to the idea of, okay, one day I open up my email and Jinx has sent me an email that just says Savior 2. And I open it up and go, well, what is this going to be? And it's this beautiful, complete song, sans the lyric and vocal. And at the time, he was going through his mother's husband had just died, and it was a very difficult time. And obviously, we were all dealing with being stuck inside and everything. And so he really put all of himself into this song. And so then there's the dual responsibilities there for me as the lyricist, right? There is the audience expectations of what this would be if we did a follow-up to this song. And then there's trying to make good on the hardships emotionally that Jinx is going through when writing this. So this one sat around for a while, in the sense that I didn't even know really how to approach it yet. Like, it took a long time to really figure it out. And over time, I just started to think about, well, when I was 20 years old, I started touring heavily at about 18. By the time I'm 20, we have a major label deal, and I'm still ostensibly just a kid. I'm a high school dropout. I have no life, I suppose I have no experience outside of just touring as an adult. And I'm now hearing all these stories from young kids about how our music is saving them and the level of importance that we have to them. So I wrote the first version of the Savior song about, I want to be there for you. And perhaps naively saying, I can be there. If no one else is there, this band, me as the singer, a member of this band, what we represent can be there for you when nothing else is. And that has remained true. But I suppose the weight that puts on you from such a young age, when I myself didn't really know who the hell I was at that age. over the years had become something that I had great respect for, but also felt as if maybe I was unprepared for, and have tried my best to navigate those waters and to remain genuine and to explain to our audience as often as I can that I am an unremarkable, flawed individual who just happens to be put on this pedestal of being in a band and that just happens to have been given this career and this shot. And I work really hard to maintain that, but I want you to understand that I am not better at dealing with life than you are. And so that's the approach I wanted to take with the second version of the song, is to say, what you have given me by virtue of giving me this career is the greatest gift that I could ever receive. What I have tried to do is to be as good of a person as I can be and to improve myself day by day. And I always kind of joke to be less of a piece of shit than the day before. And I sometimes can't do that, and I screw up, and I do my best. But the key is that our audience and myself, so many of us have grown up together. There are people who are the same exact age as me who are still coming to shows, and now they're bringing their kids or whatever it is. And so I just wanted to write a song that was really about wanting to do your best for people who have done everything for you, and also falling short of that. And also what it means to be somebody who there's an expectation on you that you are going to be great all the time, that you know what to say, how to say it, what to do, how to be, that nothing ever bothers you, that you can be sort of as any kind of pseudo fame, you can be a punching bag, or you can have whatever said to you or whatever it is online, and it'll never affect you because you're not a person. And so the idea is kind of twofold: to be able to explain, I am trying my hardest to be the thing that you need me to be, and also I am just as fallible as you are, and life is fucking hard. You know what I mean? That's really it. And I think that's a message that I hope can resonate with people who maybe even aren't a fan of ours. We live in a weird time, and we're so divided culturally, and everybody's dealing with so much. We're all just trying our hardest every day, and I think that should be, at the very least, acknowledged.
Now, what is it about good art, and you and I have touched on this before, that allows it to stand the test of time and to put the question perhaps into a sharper context? We can begin to talk about your book, Andy Biersack Presents the Works of Edgar Allan Poe. Here is a man who led an extremely unhappy life for the most part, but left us writing that we're all still trying to figure out a century and a half later. So first, if you would, tell me what it is about art that allows it to stand the test of time, and then let's talk specifics of the book and Edgar Allan Poe.
Well, I think my own introduction to Poe in terms of my life is sort of emblematic of what my experience with art has been my whole life, which is my mom reading it when she's young, owning the collected works. I get to an age where I'm getting interested in writing in general and songwriting. And she says, here's some stuff that I've read that I think you'll find really interesting. And so I dive into it. It's the same way that my dad gave me his Kiss 77 trading cards when I was 4 years old, or, took me to see AC/DC and Aerosmith as a kid. Like, all that stuff, the art has stood the test of time because of the way in which it affects individuals, and then they carry it forward. Art being entirely subjective, whether it's good or bad, that's not what makes something move forward. Something can be the greatest song in the world, but if it's played in the woods to nobody, it's never going to be moved forward. But the effect that it has on people and the sort of intrinsic value that it creates with somebody, that's what allows for them to kind of get past the baton generationally and say, this is yours now. And then in the instance of Kiss, or in the instance of Poe or anything else, those are things that I directly used for my life. I became a disciple of Gene and Paul, and watching every interview I could as a little kid and learning how they spoke and how they ran their business essentially, and what their perspectives were. In the same way that as a kid, I constantly read, so let's say, The Oval Portrait, and I said, what is the story here? What, other than it being creepy and eerie and all this stuff, what's the actual story? Well, art, career, obsession, OCD, all these things. they directly impact the person in this story's life to the degree that they let their entire life pass them by and the love of their life dies and they don't even notice because they're so engulfed in the art itself. And so how do you find a way to talk about something like that? You know, how do you tell a story that way? And so I would say that in a weird way, and again, now I'm comparing Kiss to Edgar Allan Poe. I think maybe it's just a day where I'm finding ways to compare Kiss to everything. But both of those things represent to me, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, the only way I can answer anything. The way that art carries on is through the people that are affected by it. And that's ultimately how I found Poe and why it's affected me so deeply.
So tell me, and if you would, for folks who are unfamiliar, describe the book and its production and what folks can expect.
Well, the goal was, and I mean this, I don't mean this to sound in any way patronizing or like I know my audience so well, but I do know that there are a fair number of people who are on the younger side that listen to my band that maybe are unfamiliar with what you might call like the deep cuts of Poe. Maybe they know the Raven, but they don't know the world. And then inversely, we have a lot of older fans who love literature and find connection with my lyrics and stuff like that. So the goal was to be able to take the collected works, my favorite stories of his, and present an audio and visual format for people that maybe wouldn't otherwise go to the library and pick up a collected works of Poe book and read it. This is an opportunity for, you know, I'm doing the narrated audiobook and we've got sound design on it, so it feels very sort of creepy and eerie and you can feel the stories. And then also it comes with the book to where you can read along. Or if you don't want to listen to me read it, this is a presentation of what I believe to be some of the core best Poe stories that, you know, especially if you're somebody who wants to write songs or be a lyricist, I think that they could be hugely helpful in terms of world building.
Well, it's always great to speak to you, and I can't wait to see you in Baltimore for Trinity of Terror 3, and I'm just excited for everything that you're working on, as always, and it's fun to talk music and art and all great things in life with you, Andy.
Thanks, Lou. Always a pleasure. And again, I may have set the record for the most aggrandizing talk about Kiss in the history of the world.